Chapter 10. The Sun. Quote, "The good leader knows what is true. The bad leader knows what sells best." Confucius. After the Son of Man was declared a universal enemy by the Patriarch, as he only followed the steps of his mission that the Lord of Spirits instructed him to take, he continued, despite not being pleasing to many leaders and rulers who controlled through injustice the human beings who suffered the chaos that these fascists FS created deliberately to fill their pockets and please Lumax. "Do you come to one of my houses and think you can walk freely?" The Patriarch questions him after publicly accusing him before the neighboring countries in Central Asia. "And then you have the freedom to want to devour me, just like Saturn devouring his sun," by Francisco Goya. "Where have you left compassion, empathy, and mercy that you have preached so much?" That's why God doesn't listen to your words. Instead, he scrutinizes your heart, your pattern of behavior, your actions, because you think you already roll before the faithful, and making a blessing sign is enough to cover what you do behind closed doors. But for God, nothing is hidden. That's why he knows who you truly are. Unlike you, dear Patriarch, no one writes speeches for me, because I'm not here to represent an organized oligarchy that only craves more wealth and power. This is not for me, but for the humanity of this planet, because nothing on this earth can I take with me. I came into the world naked and speechless, and so I will return to the house of my master, to Nirvana. Look at what happened to the hidden riches accumulated by the pharaohs and their pyramids, ending up plundered. Confesses the Son to the Patriarch. We are open to peaceful dialogue with all the religions of the world. The Patriarch immediately changes his discourse because he doesn't want to continue down that path. So are we. It's what we've been asking for centuries, and we invite everyone, even those behind the theater curtains. Yes, those who don't make much noise but are very effective and active because of the level of power they have. Your financiers who have granted themselves a power dynamic. That is, those who feed you, those who bring you cut and dried trees to operate that old chimney. The Son concludes, "What are you saying? No, 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 that is not of God. That's why we are autonomous and universal. Our faithful come to us to follow evangelization," confirms the Patriarch. Then it's the public that has the power, but they are narcotized, asleep, and enclosed in a hydraulic cylinder. Anyway, Patriarch, don't forget the alter ego living in you, in your home, in the cornerstone where the holy house is built, and it's still alive. For this reason, it would be wise and a great sign of peace for humanity to start with dialogue before expecting the closure of the four doors. The Son suggests again, wanting to avoid the prophesied outcome. Why so much fear of the Wheel of Souls when the Jews recognized reincarnation a long time ago? When something is not of interest, it is locked away, and no one would try to see it again. Similarly, when you don't have a seat at the table or are not invited, you are on the menu. After World War II, some of the first Judeo-Christian writings were published, and in 1947, the world learned of the Dead Sea Scrolls, revealing a biblical history change. Why did the early Christians follow a completely different concept of spiritual resurrection than what is preached today, Patriarch? The Son asks, reflecting on the words of one of the early fathers of the primitive church, Adamantius, who states that the soul exists before birth, pre-existence, and reincarnation. That is a simple heresy that was condemned since 553 by the Second Council of Constantinople. The Patriarch responds angrily, the Saturn within him emerging once again. That is why all these teachings that referred to the aforementioned were destroyed. The Son replies to the Patriarch, "Do you want to dance a tango with me? I can give you a hypnotic dance." The Patriarch says, laughing and putting his body in a dancing position, "I would love to, but I hypnotize myself with the miraculous power of metaphysics. Besides, I don't have that red tie that you wear following each hidden tango performance. But I believe that your doctrine and the source of wealth will falter drastically if people wake up from the dream you've been selling in fantasy-wrapped cloths for centuries. If they knew they would come back to life many times more than once, fulfilling desires and not forgetting the nebulous cover you give to the pineal gland, the sun introduces an anti-dogmatic response. Metaphysics, that is not of God. Moreover, the pineal gland is a sacred secret. The patriarch responds, simple, like a white dove. Of course, you use it, but don't share it, because what is not of your temple is not of God. But if nations knew that you are not the only option for achieving what you call eternal life, the sun expected that response and gave him a small dose of antithesis. We respect and share with all religious cultures of the world, the patriarch says. Yes, like you respected indigenous culture, but I can guarantee you have numbered days, as well as your false religious temples. The sun calmly expresses what is to come if the necessary changes are not made, something the patriarch already knows he must do, but he hesitates and only wants to waste time to gain an advantage in carrying out another act of blackmail. How do you think on having power, and to say what you just said, when you're just a paraplegic ha-ha-ha? You, who have no power, small and weak against our state of over 1,000 years. The patriarch looks at him with a small, incredulous smile on his face. Because I am the beloved of God, and he has called me by my name. When I pass through the waters, I will not drown, and when I pass through the fire, I will not be burned because he is with me. Isaiah 43. And you should also get to know Sri Yukteswar, because Hinduism showed us the cycle of yugas. Kali Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, Satya Yuga, and the time of Kali, wars, famines, and endless diseases ended 2 years ago in 2020, and you didn't realize. Now a new era has been added because Saskia's era is beginning with the great family of the warriors of light, and like a rainbow, you will be amazed at how quickly it will appear in front of you, out of nowhere, because you won't have to pursue them. They will come to you if you don't do what is necessary. Remember that Africa is waiting for you to stop the virus that is about to spread to your home. See it, and stop it with your team of faithful saints and your exorcists. The sun reminds the patriarch of what needs to be done. And what is Saskia? Eternal happiness. Moreover, do you talk about cycles, Marx's economic cycles? What are you talking about? Only the canonical gospel rules the world. It is the only thing we need for the salvation of souls. The incredulous patriarch repeats to the sun. Let's stop talking about happiness when humans suffer, not to mention when the hurricane with strong storms arrives. But Saskia is part of the natural order, and it is the era of truth, the era of what the Lord of Spirits fulfilled in response to Paramahansa Yogananda's question, why did he create us in this world? I did it because I wanted to share my joy and give the manifestation of the golden years again for all of humanity. It is forming like a small embryo growing in the womb of the woman, Gaia, the Mother Earth. The sun explains what is to come, but the skeptical patriarch does not want to believe, because he would first need to free himself from his old schemes and compendiums. And is this the new order? The patriarch maliciously asks the sun. No, this goes beyond your horizons, because this is the new balance between good and evil, between chiaro e oscuro, light and dark, the reform of the metamorphosis of a great collective and interconnected path. So, don't continue trying to destroy this natural balance with your pseudo-universal power. Trust to see the energetic change where a butterfly is reborn, flying without having tried this before, but in its consciousness, in the root of the mind, because there is everything it needs to know to restart without fear. The sun responds to the patriarch. I believe, son, that you need to confess, Otherwise, your soul will go straight to hell, without purgatory, the patriarch suggests. Why? Do you have the power to grant me absolution of sins? Has God granted you such power? Since when? If only God is the one who has the power to do this, where does that concept of hell come from? Can you cleanse my karma? Impressive. The trilogy of power you have: hegemony, monopoly of communication, and dependence of the non-awakened individual. The sun is stunned by so much absurdity in a single temple that maintains the verticality of power and the wealth of small groups to preserve a place of supremacy through the application of fear and imposition, through the dependence of the individual, with spiritual punishment, religious groups, economic sanctions, politics, state, or state repression, sociological regime. And likewise, the professor of evil insists on counteracting the clarities that the sun is experiencing today, with his doctrines of senseless trilogies, with his falsehoods, with his fire of hatred that consumes him because they cannot accept his loss, and they want the sun to need their approval to live his life. Infinite thanks. Because this trauma, this ongoing struggle, made me enter into synchronicity and awaken the spirit hidden within me, which was asleep, dying like a newborn not breathing. And this is the only thing the sun can say with a calmness that does not waver from his path, because this also reminds him of the prophecy of his teacher Athena when she was teaching him in the high Greek school. She looks at him and fixes him in front of the whole class, while she stops and says out loud to everyone, quote, "Hatred, racism, and extremism have no place in this country, because when it comes to human dignity, we cannot make compromises." Angela Merkel. Look to this young man. He will speak to all nations, speak to all peoples, travel around the world, and we will see him through all media because he will bring essential changes to this world, changes we need. Athena declares while the sun is stunned, since he doesn't like to know the future, but prefers to live only for today. But he leaves the Greek school and even wanted to join the military forces of the Spartans because he didn't know who he was back then. But Athena was right now that he has to face so many difficulties that made him grow and see reality. Then the teacher of evil responds, "All I wish for you is not to stray from conversion. Don't throw in the towel, don't despair, and I hope you continue forward, but in a different way than you had envisioned." This is what the evil professor writes to him. Why does the evil teacher tell me this? The sun wonders. This is the deviant society with the hypocrisy of not letting you be yourself. Because you can't be yourself, or you'll be outside the rules of society. This society that corrupts the mind and traumatizes the human being by dividing it. It makes you lose contact with the earth, with your primary senses, imposing things on you that lead to disoriented suffering, and you feel like a prisoner in a cage. Quote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to be." Carl Gustav Jung. For this reason, have you ever seen a free animal commit suicide? No, because their selves' freedom gave them a certain happiness. Instead, if you approach a zoo or look at an animal in a cage, you will find animals of all species in madness, committing suicide and doing other things they didn't do before, because they are outside their habitat, in delirium, in madness, outside harmony with the planet, with the universe, because they try to do something different from what they were destined to be, making them lose contact with their center, not allowing you the freedom to be your best version, so in the best-case scenario, you can act and emulate being someone else, but this does not allow you to be 100% original. Because if you are natural and authentic, you are a rebel, meaning you cannot be imposed upon by their dogmas, rules, or disciplines. You don't let yourself be deceived by love for nationalism or extreme religiosity, much less by a race other than humanity. Because what you want is your happiness, your peace, and it is interrelated with everything around you. But how ironic life is after they impose a false scheme on you. They ask you, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you happy? Why do you suffer?" And here come the priests or spiritual fundraisers to confuse you with their paths that are not your path. It's like getting sick and then selling you a medicine that they claim will cure you. It's like a whipper, a zotador, giving you a beating with strong lashes all over your body, lacerating your skin, opening wounds, and then selling you an ointment to heal the wounds, infections, and reduce inflammation. Despite leaving religions, it is the beginning of the journey for each one. With this new step, an enlightened one is born like Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, or Socrates, who do not adapt to society's norms because they have a commitment that goes beyond, something superior, and they cannot be imprisoned either because they are very influential and will heal those around them as they live in the truth. Then you have to murder them because they are a Christ who emerged from Christianity, emerged from that social phenomenon, that state politics accepted, and moved to the true religion that is like crystal clear water. It is one, just like science, that is unique, and there are not over 300 variations or more. Because they are lies, they are substitutes for religion, they are sex religions. And instead, those who live in the true center, surviving the suffering of fearing to take off those clothes that cover that misery. Fearing the unknown. Where does that conditioning come from that allows science to be one and religion to be so varied? Then approach real existence, to the cosmos, to Buddha's Dharma, to Jesus' love, to Lao's Tao, and to the logos that Heraclitus defines. And where is Islam born? Surely not from the 1001 Nights that brings the beauty of the creativity of the East, much less from the heart of Rumi. Not only because they were the first Arab peoples to provide the initial stages of hydraulic systems, but also because they provided innovations in the forms of writing and the development of mathematics. But then what rupture did Muhammad, the last prophet sent by Allah, bring in the 7th century AD, in the 7th century AD of the Arabia of that time, or better still, about 5,700 years in the context of the whole age of the universe in the cosmic calendar, because the chronology of the cosmic calendar already destroyed the Gregorian calendar with a big bang that leaves them with 2 huge black holes. Returning to the first Muslim who presented the break with the moral and social codes that prevailed there, we speak of polytheism, polygamy, and paganism. Therefore, how was Islam born? How was the life of its prophet? And above all, what did Islam do so that Islam managed to impose itself in Mecca, since he had fled for having the courage to preach the message of Allah? We already know that it is a monotheistic religion, with Abrahamic foundations. Id est. It shares the same internal of the Vesica Piscis in the union of the circles, Judaism and Christianity, as the second largest religion in the world, founded in Mecca. And Muhammad was able to create the union of these nations with the belief in Allah, the only God worthy, Islam, submission to the will of God, of worship. But little is known about the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad is the praised one. Mecca, 570 AD. This equals about 300 years of the age of the universe. Medina, 632 AD. That would be about 800 years of the age of the universe. But this is not the purpose of this book. We know that preaching the uniqueness of a single God in the midst of paganism or polytheism, destroying the economy of the amulet and figurine trade. And after his flight from Mecca, he was able to gather forces, followers, and make attacks on the crowds of this city, until making the Kaaba this sacred sanctuary, where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son Isaac by order of Allah, expanding not only in Saudi Arabia, but also in Syria, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, the same thing that adapted as a leopard spot in the areas of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The complication is not in Islam as a religion, But the difficulty is with the sects, the different groups within Islam, but two are the most decisive and influential. These two great sects are the Sunnis and Shiites, that they wanted to give force to the orientation to continue after the death of the Prophet without heirs, without a man to follow his teachings. So the first, Sunni, 90% of Muslims, accepted the first four caliphs. Instead, the second, Shiite, mainly in Syria, Iran, Iraq, only recognizes Caliph Ali and is in disagreement and does not recognize the first three caliphs. And furthermore, we must take into account the five main columns on which Islam rests, and so every Muslim has to follow. The Sharia or Islamic law, where Allah is recognized as absolute God and that of the Prophet Muhammad. The Salat, the daily prayers. The Zakat is what purifies or pays tribute with the aim of helping others. The Sunnah, or those fasts or habits that are carried out during the time of Ramadan as a lifestyle. And last but not least is the Hajj, or pilgrimage to Mecca, to the Kaaba, which would be making that visit at least once in life for any Muslim, to realize that dream. But what happens when the genius created by Shaitan creates a sixth pillar, if you can call it that, with a negative focus, like jihad, fighting? Yet so many Muslims have the belief that this is used as a military army to defend their faith, that difficult fight, internal and external impulses for the cause of Islam, because the real purpose was not to create a new religion, but to return to the origin for which Allah had created humanity, thus justifying religious wars and offering chaos to the current Middle East, a region controlled by a theocratic government, dominated by a deviant Islam in political matters. Imam, spiritual matters are very complicated and complex. Dedicate yourself only to guiding souls on the good path it will be enough. Do not make the same mistakes as the Holy House. And a system of extremist groups leads to darkness, a twilight of the beautiful culture of this region that brought so many graceful things to humanity. So, this is very dangerous for the stability of any society and for living in peace with the different nations. Well, what a blessed drought of the 6th century in Saudi Arabia that gave birth to a so radical change. And this is the true last pillar, the so-called 6th pillar. It is not that they are confused by their introversion and discretion from the royal pillar, column and bridge that has united and sustained, for all this time, the entire structure on which Islam is founded. Where did such poetry come from? Then one night the Son of Man was blessed to have a solemn conversation, to use the consciousness with the shared knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad and the Most High and only Allah, entering a room where all of them were, in brotherhood. For me, the 6th pillar is another and is much more important. The Son expresses himself while talking with Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. "Isn't it jihad for you?" asks the Prophet Muhammad while looking at Allah. With all due respect, no. That is not a pillar for such an ancient religion. Like Islam, the Son sits with the two of them. Express yourself, then. We are interested in expressing your thoughts with your Muslim brothers who still do not understand it. Allah invites him to share with his brothers. Yes, don't be afraid, please. To you the word, confirms the Prophet Muhammad. Thank you. Because, as I said, for me the 6th pillar is what gave life to the Muslim religion. Without that, it was not possible for Islam to germinate, and without them, Islamism could not grow or even maintain itself for all these centuries. This is so particular that it can exist without Islam, but Islam cannot live without them, because it would be a body without a soul, and no one has known the beauty of a body without a divine soul, which is that flame that elevates the being out of the cosmos and allows it to unite with the One. Because if a religion is still alive, it is because of this. And this is simple. It means a loving relationship with Allah, a true relationship with the All, where the All is the one that is prepared to melt with the all, because you are willing to invite him into your heart, because he is not conditioned by any dogma, doctrine, and you do not know the formalities of creed, church, temples, or monasteries. For this reason, Christ was this, as you were this too, Mohammed. So also, Krishna is one of this, just like Buddha entered into this to enter in the enlightenment. But before, it is necessary to remember that this, right? The son pauses for a moment before the Lord of Spirits and his brother Muhammad. It is true. Without this, I couldn't start what I did, confirms the Prophet Muhammad. I am understanding your clarity. You continue. Insists Allah, the Lord of the Spirits urges the son not to stop and to continue with the definition of the forgotten now that it has a name. It's the core, who bears various names of the same supreme relationship with Allah. And this relationship is very dangerous. And it is so dangerous because the closer you are to Allah, the more you begin to evaporate, to lose that self, and when you are so close, well, you no longer exist. And for this, it is suicide. But this kind of suicide is beautiful, because dying for Allah is the only way to live, because if you don't die, you won't be able to live. And this is the best ecstasy. Live this poetry. And if you don't voluntarily die for love, you will live and vegetate meaninglessly, living in the minimum. Therefore, this removes the obstacle that exists between you and you, between being and being, between the part and the whole. And that's all. There is no other word. There is no other synonym. It is the uniqueness that gives the connection with everything. The son stops for a moment to continue again. That's why, if you're not prepared to bite this, try this nectar. At least you'll be able to catch it. It is like a cocoon that wakes up in the morning, and this is so delicate that it only passes from person to person, since it cannot be passed from a text because it goes beyond words. Well, it's heart to heart, for which you can read all the literature of this, and you won't be able to know it. And this phase is called silsila, as well as the parampara of yoga. But one must be a lover of Allah without fear. Have courage. No fear, because love is not born from fear. Since man has been taught to fear Allah, and the result is that in the end, Ignacio Ramirez El Nigromante, and not Friedrich Nietzsche, declared that God, or Allah, was dead, because the mind cannot tolerate fear. Nothing of fear, because fear is not born love. Since man has been taught to fear Allah, and the result is that in the end, Nietzsche declared that God or Allah had died, because the mind cannot tolerate fear. But people who get close to this must love it, must have love, because this is a beautiful thing, and it has so many beautiful meanings. Once Abul Hassan Ali Hassani Nadwi, who was an old master of this wonderful pillar, he said, "Once it was a nameless reality, and now it is a name without a reality." For this reason, all the great religious fathers were clothed in this, and they lived in secret for centuries. The son stops again to continue with his explanation. Quote, "Recite in the name of your Lord who created. He created man from a blood clot. Recite. And your Lord is the supreme benefactor, which he taught man by pen. He taught man what he did not know. The Holy Quran. And even Moses covered himself with wool that represents this, because you have to be an animal that abandons all kinds of philosophy or theology, without having to choose, without having to suppress, without having to poison your mind, your body, and your soul, without having to go crazy. That is why people are always busy, because they do not want to see that repression, but the animal does not repress, rather it accepts. That's why the man who wears this has an animal innocence in his eyes, like nature that moves away from the Sharia law, due to its oppression and ignorance. However, this is called Sufism, being a Sufi that brings peace, joy, and celebration, without being false. This is how the son explains to them what for him is the sixth pillar of Islam. This reminds me of a man who was dressed as Satan because he was going to a costume party. But on the way, it started raining, and he rushed into a church where there was a celebration with people gathered. But when the people saw this demon costume, they started running, throwing themselves out of the windows and screaming like crazy. Says the son. "Help! Help!" People shouted and ran away, even throwing themselves out of the window. But a young woman got her dress hooked on the iron edges of the window. She was trapped, with no way out, while the man in the costume approached her. The son emphasizes, "Satan, I have been a member of this church for more than 20 years, but in reality, I've always been on your side," the terrified girl shouts. And that's the situation of all the ladies and gentlemen. In words, they are in the service of God, but basically, they are surrendered to the devil's feet. Because the devil is deeper, he has entered their hearts. They are repressed, creating automatic hypocrisy. Instead, the Sufi is simple, only knows Allah, does not know good or evil. They only know God, Allah, without prejudices, without ideas, without dirt. It's not that Allah is sitting on a throne in heaven, because Allah is here, inside you, and the Sufi is the man of purity, cleanliness, purification. But it does not mean pure in the sense of being good or following the 10 Commandments, rather, pure in the divine sense. Being with transcendence, a chosen friend of God, of Allah, because He is the master who chooses you, not the other way around. The son concludes part of what Sufism means to him. "You have understood where my faith was born, because I did not know if I was a prophet or a poet when I came out of the cave," says the Prophet Muhammad. "You have understood the basis of love, the foundation of the only religion to reach the transcendent, moving away from philosophy, word, and logic, just as science divorced philosophy, becoming experimental and no longer dependent on thought. Both belong to reality. Science with external reality, and Sufism with inner reality," concludes Allah, with a certain joy. Also, a Sufi imam told me in the midst of his meditations how a dear neighbor and Jewish brother were invited to the church because it was better than that old synagogue. So, a Catholic priest was trying to convert him. The Prophet Muhammad begins to tell this anecdote. Why is one better than the other? Allah reflects, amazed at the fantasy of the oppression of men who, out of fear of being alone, begin to attack what is around them. "I don't understand this reasoning, but that's what the priest of that church used to say," replies, and continues the Prophet Muhammad. "Don't worry, Jew. This transition of faith or religious conversion is very simple. All you have to do is say 3 times, 'I was Jewish, now I am Catholic. I was Jewish, now I am Catholic. I was Jewish, now I am Catholic. There you go, done. Now you are one of us.' And so the priest tells him, and the Jew does it, following the instructions. So, after he said it, the priest wanted to confirm the fact, and thought it would be a good idea to visit the Jew at his house one Friday, to greet him and check. 'Oh, Holy Father, what are you doing?' exclaims and asks the priest. 'Because he finds him cooking, yes, frying chicken,' clarifies Prophet Muhammad. 'You know you can't eat chicken on Fridays.' The priest reminds him, 'Yes, I can. I fried it 3 times in the pan, saying, "You were a chicken, now you are a fish. You were a chicken, now you are a fish. You were a chicken, now you are a fish." The Jew innocently replies to the priest, "And that's how they are all living. All religions are only living verbally. It doesn't penetrate your being. They think one thing, say another, and do also something different. In other words, real chaos. This is the Trinity twisted they talk about, and that's why these 3 elements go in opposite directions, like bullets through the air. Hence the suffering of men, due to misunderstanding. Because the animal is one." Prophet Muhammad concludes the anecdote he heard with attention in the mystical meditation of his brother Imam and Sufi. That's why they sacrifice the Sufis, crucify them because they make conscious those who live in falsehood, in ideas, in hypocrisies. Instead, if you start living in me, you are intolerable to the so-called society since they do not live in truth. And this is not tolerable. It has to be crucified, reflects Allah, the Lord. Is it true that they love a building more and have forgotten to love the Son I sent a long time ago? Christ, where they love a so-called superior father, a king, but cannot love Jesus, my Son, who has been betrayed and crucified. That is, he is less. Christ is minor than a pontiff, than a pope. Asks Allah, the Lord of spirits, surprised at such childish behaviors living in their hearts. Prophet Muhammad and the Son of Man listen in silence, and they look at each other while Allah continues talking. Sufi means purity, because the mind has disappeared. There is no negative or positive mind, and consequently, there is no thought, eliminating the being of the self and ascending to a state of satori, samadhi. But how can men choose me if they do not know me? And that is why it is me choosing who knows me. To see my face and love what I am, from the root, the absolutely infinite. And this is Sufism. Allah shows them, the Lord Yahweh. Indeed, not even the Persians could give another literary meaning to Sufism. It is just Sufism. But you can enter in the temple of Sufism and try it with your heart. Just as the Quran explains with the three qualities required for understanding. Humility, sharing or the joy of giving, and the last one is sincerity or authenticity, reveals Prophet Muhammad to the Son as well. And then someone knocks on the door in the middle of this pleasant conversation they are having, the three of them having understood so much in a short time, and where the Lord of the Spirits is pleased to see his children grow in real truth. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the room where the three are sharing sounds. Who could it be? The Son wonders. I don't know, as I was not expecting anyone else, says Prophet Muhammad. Open that door, or else you won't understand who might be on the other side, suggests Allah, the Lord. At that moment, the Son understood that he had to get up quickly and open that door. And so he does, being surprised by such a surprise. Oh, look who it is, says the Son very joyfully. And there was the Rabbi Jesus Christ, with his radiant aura, happy and smiling to come and share with everyone. Hello, brother. He looks at him for a few seconds with his beautiful smile and hugs him as if he had found a family member he had known all his life and hadn't seen for a long time. So, the Son is left speechless by such a surprise and joyous beyond measure for such affection that he did not expect to have such an honor. Well, look what a surprise, says Allah, the Lord of Spirits. Come in, brother Jesus. Prophet Muhammad tells him, integrating into the room in a pleasant gesture with his right hand, and relaxed to see one more of them. And so, Jesus Christ enters, relaxed and joyful before his Father and his brothers. But what joy! What are you discussing? What is the conversation that kept you so busy that you forgot to open a door when it's better to leave it open? Jesus asks consciously and teases them about their delay, about totality. But tell me, Jesus, what happened there with your mission? Allah, the Lord of Spirits, or Allah responds and questions. Well, I was not accepted. I was not recognized, not even by my own people. Due to the faith that was misinterpreted and entangled until now, belief is minor than the trust, because they have not understood that belief is static, it is a dead nature. Instead, you have to have trust to enter the cosmos, in the center, and to trust life while also trusting others, and the only utensil is love. So, people with good hearts, but who already had a twisted belief, a prejudice, or rather an idea of how I had to be, and this opposed my path, creating a horrible mental game for all of them, due to the limited knowledge they had, and this was reflected in the minds of those around me. Jesus, begins to explain what happened. On that occasion, you were both man and divine, but why you were not recognized? I who made you flesh and a reflection of my being like all beings in this world. Allah, the Lord of spirits, or Allah is surprised. Yes, Father, but it all ended up twisted in the worship of a false prophet. The one who denied me 3 times, and now they sing a hymn of praise to these surrogate successors of this holy house. Jesus Christ is disappointed at how they could be further from the truth. And he takes a piece of cucumber dipped in pinsimonium and begins to taste it. I understand you, my son. It happens almost always to INFJs. They do the hard work, and others take all the credit. But don't worry, it's only a matter of time. The Lord of the Spirits replies relaxed and takes a piece of fennel and dipping it in pinsimonio that is served on the table in that room. That's why I have learned very well from all of you, and I work hard, very hard, but I am not a stupid pendejo man. I am smart, and that's why I take all the malopo and share this loot with all those I want to, with the African and the Indian, with the Arab and the Jew, with the Asian and the American, with the Russian and the Latino, with everyone, without distinction. This is delicious. The Son of Man takes a piece of carrot already dipped in pinsimonio and talks very relaxed while he eats one of his favorite vegetables. I understand you, Son of Man. I see that you have learned very well, because look, that is why they have tried to take away even my humanity, created by the love of a man and a woman, raised in a family. And miraculously, they have let me be born from my mother's womb. However, now it turns out that I did not have a social, dynamic, happy life when I enjoyed an authentic and unpretentious daily life, and in addition, some men added themselves as firsts in the hierarchical line of this religion to become great misogynist pontiffs who have stained the name of my friend and companion, Mary Magdalene, the one who accompanied me until the last days of my life, also nullifying and denying my fleshly descent, my lineage. Jesus is surprised by the mistakes of the new Christians who have made him born of a virgin, that is, static and sad, performing miracles only to reach the so-called bodily resurrection or reincarnation through a natural death. She was my beloved, not a wife, without being a lover, without being loved, only love, until transcending the animal desire and elevated. Jesus points to her at the door as he approaches because he is not afraid of what they will say. My beloved, not a husband because we chose each other without imposition to create life in eternity. Mary Magdalene responds to Jesus in a cheerful and serene way as she watches him with clear eyes, full of grace. Understanding that true love is based on the loyalty of the relationship that is love and not on the bonds ruled by a piece of paper. This was an invention by humanoids who have wanted to deceive us for centuries and so many generations with their selfish rules that have allowed our family to be enslaved, listening to the same music in hell without end, leaving Eden out of fear of what they will say. And they end up eating the same food, losing the balance of life, of passion for procreation, to improve human evolution, that is, entering samadhi in a balanced way. Thus, this is contrary to life, because true alchemy is spiritual sexuality in fusion with love, which goes from coal to diamond, says the Son of Man. So, they have not understood that I continue to be born every day in human beings, in those babies, human and divine, that I am there in their center, in their heart, hidden, but few make me be born again in them, to mix the soil with the sky, the water with the earth that gives birth to life. The Lord of Spirits explains the opportunity for awakening that each one has within. Quote, Ven del Libano, Cantos del Camino, Neo Catechumenal. Then, at that moment, Shiva, Gautama Buddha, Zoroaster, Lao Tzu, and Socrates also enter the room, joining their brothers. They take a pause to greet each other with the satisfaction of seeing in each one of them a part of themselves because they are interconnected in them, offering immeasurable joy for this reunion. And after settling down, they continue talking. And is it true that wars are still being created for the beliefs, for the religions, for the differences? La God, the Lord of Spirits, asks surprised. Unfortunately, it is still like that, Master, responds upset Prophet Muhammad, displeased with what they still do in his name. Yes, Master, they start attacking each other because they do not recognize their own blood, their own brother next to them. They see him as an enemy, not understanding that what they profess in their homes is the same as what the other does in his, surely with diverse cultures. But if it's different, it's not accepted. It's as if they have found an alien race that wants to enslave them again, as in the times of the Anunnaki, Egyptians, or Indians of Mesoamerica, says the Son of Man to the Lord of Spirits. But if each head is an original house in its being, each one is unique, a wonderful specimen in its creation. I never wanted to have identical sons and daughters, but interconnected through the energy of the Spirit. Allah, the Lord of Spirits, responds amazed at the obtuse thinking that many still have in their being for not yet recognizing the transcendental self. Well, truly, I tell you, brothers, they can do whatever they want because that is not my home. My home is here and in those places where they accept me with love in their entirety, without judging, without prejudice, because I have understood their behaviors, and the only thing I can do is have compassion for them. I did not create any organization. Successive followers did this, and I learned this from Buddha because he did not create a religion either, responds the called Messiah, Jesus, smiling at everyone because he lives in peace, in his miraculous method, in his inner home of his being that is divided into catalysis as a catalytic entity, catalepsy that stops you due to entropy, catharsis that is total purity, catastrophe that is the weakness of the ego, cross that is the elimination of the ego, conversion that is your higher self, or Atman, and finally, consciousness that is one with the One. This shows the footprints followed by the teacher and Rabbi Jesus while he was in India and found the 7 steps that are significantly the same as the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, and this last one divided into 2 phases, Samprajmat or Sabij and Asamprajnat or Nirbija. This makes me think of what happened between 2 rabbis of Hasidism, as Rabbi Bunam had gone blind, and then Rabbi Fischel went to visit him to offer him some of his wonderful cures for his eyes, explains Rabbi Jesus. Trust me, I will make you regain your sight. Fischel happily tells Bunam, this is not necessary as I see what I need to see. Bunam responds to Fischel with great tranquility, because Bunam's spirituality was an internal, transcendental vision. He had a clear, spontaneous, and natural vision without having to practice a virtue or a religion. Because he understood that religious people who practice virtue are not original, and that's why they only create more conflicts among themselves. Instead, Bunam already knew who he was and could see himself in others. In the same way, you don't have to use the name of our Master, because no one has to feel used. Not even the grace of the Lord of Spirits, because these things are absurd. Wanting to use God is simply a crime, continues Jesus Christ. Why do you say this? Have you observed how Lumax sends followers to create an organization and not a religion? Asks Zarathustra. Exactly, brother. Let me tell you one of the many creativities used by humans who play with God. A Protestant pastor, a rabbi, and a priest were discussing the best way to determine how to use the money collected in the name of God. The first, the Protestant pastor says, well, I draw a line on the ground, Take the money and throw it all in the air. What falls to the left is for God, and what falls to the right, I keep. Instead, says the second, the priest explains, I have a system almost similar. I create a circle on the ground, so what falls inside is mine, and what falls outside is yours. Finally, the third, the rabbi smiles and concludes, I do it equally. I throw everything into the air. What the Lord catches is his. But my God is very kind because he never wants anything. Jesus says, laughing, and they all laugh. Since their pockets are full, let them use these resources as an instrument to help others around them. Responds the Lord of Spirits with a slight smile. Recognize the total surrender of religion, which is feminine because it does not seek war, but the higher transcendental contact, without the need to create pseudo-institutions. That's why when a man like Jesus is born, it's the women who approach first, because they perceive that energy turned into trust and stay by his side until the last moment. Remember Mary Magdalene, who poured her perfume for the imperceptible love that Judas did not understand, and the two Marys and Martha who were there until the end of his life. Instead, in the religious organization, you observe that attitude of men who were all hiding in fear, terrified among the crowd, waiting for a miracle, and there is born the art of supremacy, discord, and war. This masculine vein, what infinite, dazzling wisdom! To find the awakening of consciousness about who you are, to be able to pass behind the mirror of what you project, beyond appearances. To stop the emotions, to hold on to that glass mirror that is the same as the reflection of your being in the water, but is not. Since it makes you come out of those images that identify you and realize that what you are looking at is not a snake, but a rope. To wake up from that dream, to emerge from that chimera, says the Son of Man. And the Lord of Spirits listens attentively and doesn't say a word, because he knows that one day, not very far away, everyone will understand the principle of awakening, which is not linear, not circular, but rather spiral. That is, reconciled and reunited in time, which is infinite and matter in its form. Because God cannot be understood or personified in a gender, this is just an idea of the ego, like philosophy, science, or many other religions that try to understand, thereby separating themselves from the divinity of being, which is in that inner silence and external omnipresence, to take a blue form covering the golden fire of the ajna, allowing you to jump into that energetic frequency or purple vibration that connects you with the Sahasrara. Feeling the emptiness, the void that brings a stillness in the mind without engaging in rituals. And so it is, daughters and sons of the Lord of the Spirits. The true religion is the one that awakens consciousness, transcends appearances, and connects us with the divine essence that resides in each of us. Human institutions often deviate from the true spiritual purpose by focusing on power, hierarchy, and the accumulation of wealth. It's beautiful to see how simplicity and profound understanding can be found in the wisdom of individuals, beyond the organizational structures created by humans. Because you must understand that this is a balance in movement, mind and body indivisible, and this already existed in the Valley of the Spirits because it cannot be imitated but experienced in each one's unique and indescribable life, with a feminine harmony, like coming out of madness with a mind at zero, empty and unoccupied. Because when you are in meditation, you don't think. You are not in the words that reflect the real, but are not the total reality. That's why you step out of the social spin that feeds the ego, as it doesn't allow you to live. Then you bloom like the beauty of the lotus, bear fruit, and are ready to be cut. This is living outside of religion. This is living in life, which is part of death, and not fearing it because it completes its cycle, being aware that you are one, that your existence is indivisible from your being and the universe. You cannot live without the sun and the oxygen, which are part of the whole. Therefore, never forget that you are the whole, explains Lao Tzu, while everyone in the room is surprised because he is a man of few words. Exactly, but instead, they wanted to create a single line. That is, imitate my life, which was one and cannot be repeated. In fact, every time I see so many people sad and dead inside because they are imitating my life, says Jesus, because many find it difficult to understand the path of awakening, which is individual and unique. As Heraclitus tells us, you cannot step into the same river twice, responds the Son of Man. And why do they get lost in perfection? When this leads you to build a partial structure, not complete, it does not make you rise. Instead, in life you have to seek totality, which gives harmony from right to left, from inside out, from bottom to top. Socrates reminds them, and this totality is easier to obtain since it has been there since you were born. You just need to breathe consciously because this is not a challenge for the ego. It does not let it grow, and that ego is not strengthened as society demands when you are aware, avoiding having a disease in the animal or physical being, adds Buddha. Quote, the good ones shine from afar, like the Himalayan mountains, but the bad live in the dark, like arrows shot at night. Dhammapada. Therefore, there comes the time of disdain, the moment for the Superman to release golden words in front of his works. He does not want many virtues and does not desire luck in his favor. They also announce the coming lightning and disappear because he does not want to be in the middle of the path of awakening for those who are seeking it, speaks Zarathustra, who gives value to the word. So they have found what they were looking for, the power of energy, of the highlight that opens the doors of the universe through vibrations of gratitude connected with feet on the ground, concludes Socrates. They all remain in joy for the grace they are experiencing in that room, and it is there that they all go out for a walk and then return to the room. Suddenly, they encounter a being in the form of a splendid man, with a beautiful body, radiant skin, and a dark color. This man had a shining energy due to his primordial nature that comes from the universe, from the cosmos, from the Lord of Spirits, and he arrives without a name, without a formal introduction, because he has not been recognized since the beginning of humanity when he comes out of the mud in the navel of the world. Yet he arrives as a drop of water with the breath from the heavens above, so he is not recorded in history, since it has to be altered because many do not want him to be accepted. He must be excised from the chronology of creation and is called None, the Unknown. Despite understanding, intelligence, and strength in his way of being, without forgetting his generosity for the lands he has inhabited, but each has used, extracted, and ravaged those soils where he has been to leave them naked and without consciousness. None does not complain because he is not of this world and knows well the secrets of this planet that defends itself, transforms from time to time, and so he also changes from place to place, form to form, because he loves to intervene and protect humanity that is discovering itself in each phase of life. I see you all, and I greet you, sending my energy with immense joy. None smiles while taking a seat, looks at all his brothers, and stops his gaze at his creator, at his master. Everyone in the room recognizes him and reciprocates the same respect and mutual love. And there, Shiva, who never spoke but only observed, duplicates and starts playing his flute in Krishna's semblance, while he dances at the same time and delights his brothers. Some dance in a circle, others applaud, and the rest move delicately and smiling with the cheerful rhythm that makes them vibrate from within. Afterward, they all walk out of that old building in the background because all of them are stepping out of the ideology of what God is for society and the old religions. Since God is nature itself, you can see, smell, and touch him/her everywhere and anywhere.